I've been burned, I've been broken. Still I rise, yeah, the story's been spoken. Every scar just shows what I came through. I'm stronger now, and I shine brand new. Oh, the climb was steep, but I held on tight. Step by step, I found my life. Shots fired, but I keep moving. Turn the pain.
Welcome back to The Rise, From Ashes to Altitude, a living, breathing book tour based on my award-winning book, Shots Fired, A Heroine's Memoir. I'm your host, Tracy Lance, and through intimate conversations, behind-the-scenes storytelling, and powerful guest voices, we explore what it really means to rise from trauma, reclaim resilience, and turn wounds into wisdom. Each episode is a tour stop into a different part of the journey that takes us somewhere new, geographically, emotionally, spiritually, from fire and bullets to forgiveness and elevation. Our mission is to create a space where vulnerability is honored, healing is possible, and every listener is reminded your story carries strength, your voice carries truth, and your scars are no longer wounds. They're beauty marks of survival that make you bulletproof. Can you believe it? We're on episode 8. We've made it to the midpoint of our 16-week climb, what I like to call the mid-rise. And I've been thinking a lot about what it means to rise, not just once, but over and over again. So today, I want to pause and reflect, just me and you, no guests, just heart. Let's take in the view again on Mount Kilimanjaro. Those Kilimanjaro chapters in my book are some of the most powerful ones because that mountain pulled together everything I've lived through. The fire, losing vision in my eye, the violence of being shot, the valleys, the heartbreak, the hope, the rising again and again. When I started this Rise podcast, my heart's intention was clear. I wanted this to be a sacred space, a space where we could gather in truth and vulnerability and in celebration of what it really means to rise. Not just stories, but soul work. Not just testimony, but transformation. And in the first episode, I said something that becomes more true every time I sit behind this microphone. I talked about the goal of this podcast as having conversations that will remind us that no matter what we've been through, we can rise again. And we've done exactly that. We have had honest conversations that made us cry. We've healed, we've celebrated, and we've witnessed some of the most powerful truths women can share. These conversations have transformed this podcast into a movement, not just conversations, a movement. And you've been right here with me, listening, sharing, crying, laughing, and rising right alongside each story. But I want to add something today. Rising doesn't mean erasing the past. It means building a life that isn't controlled by it. That is what this mid-rise is, a chance to stop, breathe, reflect, and look at how far we've come together. When I think about this first half of our journey, I think about the courage it took for each woman to show up fully, honestly, and unguarded. Marcy's episode will forever be etched in my spirit. We stood together in the desert heat of Phoenix during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and later halfway across the world in Thailand. To stand in a city named after the mythical bird that rises from the ashes with my own daughter who has done exactly that. She became my phoenix after that episode. Marcy is an incredible mother of 2 amazing children. She's a photographer and the editor, director, and producer of this very podcast through her company, Charlie's Light Creatives. She was my first guest. She's also an athlete playing for the Boom Flag football team, proof that her strength and spirit are unmatched. Marcy showed us what it looks like to fight for your life with grace, grit, and divine purpose. At just 35 years old, through her stage 3C triple negative breast cancer journey, one of the most aggressive forms of the disease, she has become a walking, breathing reminder that purpose can rise right out of pain. But she shared that when you come face to face with death, you begin to question your purpose. Marcy opened her heart and said, I still feel like I'm living in the ashes, like death is looming over me. I want to forget that this ever happened. She feels like every doctor's appointment is going to discover something. She feels like every day is scary and death is looming over her. To this day, she still struggles to identify with having breast cancer as she prepares for a double mastectomy to continue the fight. Her journey reminded us that sometimes healing means returning to the source, to nature, to spirit, to self, and allowing the light to meet us where we are. Watching her rebuild has been like witnessing resurrection in real time. Then, in Sandy's episode, set under the red rocks and spiritual energy of Sedona, she brought fire and reflection and matched that Sedona energy effortlessly. She shared a story of unstoppable resilience as she spoke about enduring sexual abuse multiple times, beginning at age 5, raising 2 babies while pursuing her education, and she too faced an aggressive stage 3C triple negative breast cancer battle and subsequent double mastectomy. She said, you never get over the rape, you just learn to live with it. Regarding cancer, she is counting down to year number 5 of being cancer free. Yet she never stops. She has written her memoir, Making Faith Moves No Matter What, a memoir of survival, strength, and unshakable faith. Please pick up that book as soon as it's released. It's like a masterclass in faith, resilience, and the power of reinvention. Sandy showed us the power of voice, how breaking the silence can heal generations. Her journey taught us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak, even if your voice trembles. In the soulful heartbeat of New Orleans during Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, Elaine opened the doors to a story many never saw coming. Her story of rebuilding after heartbreak and finding her spiritual footing again touched so many hearts. This story stopped me in my tracks. She spoke of the heartbreak of losing her beloved mother to domestic violence, a murder she witnessed at 9 years old. She bravely shared with us that the image of witnessing her mom's death at the hands of her stepfather never goes away. She even talked about how she raised her daughters to live without her. She shared how people look at her life today and say, you've got it all together. But people never know what's underneath the aesthetics. Her desire now is to become a prayer warrior, to turn her pain into power and to remind others, recognize the abuse, know that it's not always physical. Get out. Because when her mom decided to get out, it was too late. Elaine reminded us that our stories don't define us, they shape the depth of who we become. To have witnessed such tragedy and still speak about it with such grace and clarity, now that's sacred strength. The willingness to tell your truth out loud is the ultimate act of rising. Elaine's voice needed to be heard, and now it finally is. And then we traveled to the breathtaking Amalfi Coast with Kristen, a phenomenal millennial mom, wise beyond her years. She spoke about the devastating loss of her beautiful boy TJ, giving birth to him in his stillness, and losing her 18-year-old cousin to suicide. We talked about how when life takes what we hold most dear, God's presence meets us in the stillness, and how grief could be lifelong, it just changes its shape. She shared that after the first traumatic loss, you kind of know how to deal with the next one. Not that it hurts any less, you are just more familiar with how to deal with the loss. She spoke openly about PTSD, balancing motherhood as a conscious parent, being intentional with every decision she makes regarding her children, her marriage, and her identity. It was another masterclass, but in authenticity, grief, and the many faces it wears. Through her faith, her children, and the memory of the one who never took a breath, she reminds us that hope is not born from having everything go right. It's born from surviving everything that went wrong. Kristen reminded us that love for family, for God, and for self, not necessarily in that order, is the foundation we need to build everything on. And that grief doesn't define us, it doesn't erase love, it deepens it. And when you stop self protecting, God can protect you. Because God will meet us in the places we can no longer stand on our own. She said, our strength will always run out, and that's when God does his best work through us, because we're not that good at carrying the weight alone. Her episode shows us that the power of rising is one that we could never imagine. You know, sometimes a podcast can seem like entertainment, a show you listen to on your drive or while you're cooking dinner. But these conversations, these women have come on here and shared their truth, their heartbreak, their real life nightmares. They invited us into a sacred territory, into their stories of healing, and I don't take that lightly. I marvel at how brave they were for telling their stories so eloquently, with grace, courage, and purpose. They have transformed this podcast into a movement. Each of these women has poured a different kind of medicine into this space. And if you've been listening closely, there's one thread that ties them all together, a thread weaving through all of their stories, a quiet, steady truth. Rising doesn't mean you have to have it all together, that you've healed, that you've made it. Rising means you've decided not to stay where you fail. It means choosing to keep going even when life feels heavy. And if I'm honest, this first half of the rise has been just as healing for me as it's been for anyone listening. Every story has mirrored a part of my own, from surviving trauma to discovering purpose to learning how to rest in faith. There were moments in these conversations that made me stop mid-sentence, moments that reminded me how strong women truly are. We carry so much silently, faithfully, gracefully, and still somehow we rise. When I realized how much strength hides behind a woman's smile, how many of us out there showing up for others even while we're still learning to show up for ourselves. And I've learned something powerful. The climb is never just about reaching the top. It's about who you become on the way up. Listen, every climb has that moment when you stop, turn around, and take in the view. When I was on Mount Kilimanjaro, we were encouraged at every campsite to take a picture, reflect, and look at how far we had come. You could see the valleys you'd already crossed, the rainstorms we hiked through, our footprints pressed deep into the mud. and the light waiting just a little higher up the mountain. And sometimes that light can seem closer than it appears. There's a place on Kilimanjaro called Stella Point. From a distance, it looks exactly like Uhuru Peak, which is the highest point on the mountain. It's the destination. When we finally reached Stella Point, it was below 20 degrees with a wind chill of below 50. I was literally frozen, exhausted, delirious, delusional, whatever you want to call it, and convinced I had made it. Now, anyone who knows me know that I am allergic to winter. I despise the cold and I could hibernate like a bear in the winter months. It was Africa, for goodness sake, so I didn't even expect it to be that cold. But when I made it to Stella Point, I celebrated. I was rejoicing. We had made it. And then one of the porters looked at me and said, "We're not there yet." He told me we still had another hour to go, 600 feet, an hour to go. You don't understand. I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't even believe that I was not at the peak of the mountain. And here he is telling me we still have an hour to go. It was complete BS. I looked ahead, like squinting into the clouds, trying to see if I could see the true summit. And for a second, I honestly thought Ashton Kutcher was about to pop out and tell me we'd been punked. I'll never understand why Stella Point is even necessary. I get pissed off right now just thinking about Stella Point. But the point is, that mountain is definitely a metaphor for life. Man, it's like the mountain took all the pieces of my story, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, and put them right there in front of me and showed me that the climb is part of the healing. Honestly, before this show, I used to think that healing had a finish line, but that's only true for all of those 30 marathons I've run. A moment where everything feels peaceful because I made it. I crossed the finish line, and you feel like you're finally done right when they place that finisher's medal around my neck. But running is very different from mountain climbing because healing doesn't work like that. Trauma doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that. And if life has ever hit you with something you thought you'd already healed from, then you know it, then you know that moment too. That mountain is trauma theory in motion because just like Kilimanjaro, life has a way of making you think that you finally made it, that you've reached the top, only to whisper, "You're not there yet." So, are we ever really there? The truth is, the summit in life and healing and purpose isn't a final destination. It's a journey, a series of peaks and plateaus, moments where we pause, reflect, and keep moving. Sometimes it feels like we've arrived, only to realize there's still more growth, more work, more grace waiting for us. And that's okay. We're always rising, always learning, always unfolding. There is no final there, but there is growth. There is peace. There are days when the memories feel lighter. There are mornings when your body exhales in a way it hasn't before. There are nights when the past doesn't follow you to bed. And every one of those moments is a summit, a small, sacred summit. You don't reach the summit because you're strong. You reach it because you refuse to stop climbing. I've realized that rising isn't linear. It's messy. It's emotional. Sometimes it's quiet and unseen, but it's also sacred. And every scar, every stumble, every setback is part of something God is using for good. I think back to my own journey, the ashes I came from, the fire I walked through, and how I never could have imagined that those same ashes would one day light the path for others. That's what this space has become, a sanctuary for every woman who's ever wondered if she could start over again. You can. You already are. We're always going to be tested, always going to face challenges. There's the cancer diagnosis, the miscarriage, the breakup, the layoff, the devastating and unexpected loss. But then life gently reminds us, you're not there yet. Maybe there isn't a place at all. In so many ways, we're always a work in progress. Maybe there is learning to rise over and over again, no matter what the past tries to hold on to, no matter what life throws our way. And when we stop, even for a moment, to look back, we see how far we've already come. That reflection, that pause, that awareness, that's the midpoint, the stellar point, where we gather strength for the next stretch of the climb. As we move into the second half of the rise, I want you to know the best is still ahead. We're going deeper. I can feel a shift, deeper conversations, more truth, more freedom. We'll talk about forgiveness, purpose, womanhood, rebuilding, and what it means to truly live free. We'll meet new voices from more phenomenal women who've walked through fire and found their wings on the other side. So, as we step into the next half, I want to invite you to reflect. What does rising look like for you right now? Maybe it's setting a boundary. Maybe it's forgiving someone. Maybe it's finally resting. Maybe you need to pause, work on yourself, take a solo journey, practice prioritizing self care, or let go of what's holding you back. Whatever it is, honor it. You're doing the work. And if this podcast has touched you in any way, I'd love for you to share it, tag us, leave a review, or tell another woman who needs to hear these stories. Because the more we share, the more we rise together. I'll see you next week when we continue the climb right here on the Rise Podcast. Until then, keep rising one step at a time. Remember, the journey to healing isn't a straight climb, but every step forward matters. So, wherever you are on your journey, feel it, face it, trust that something greater is always waiting on the other side. Thank you for always giving yourself the gift of exploring what it really means to survive, to heal, and to rise. Let's take this journey, keep traveling, and rise together.
Turn the struggle into gains. Every step I rise again.